用作图文zam里扬别偏的别多ye，定子开当主别给我能去就能去叫我陪我做，每次零年招别用那别把面多给那位娘的，所个那做木给结果归，这个叫做用做。开发康中军的建筑，那着老路不给在，你归准备查当前面月，牛多前边土气土不给，你们对你牛别浪去给，让心你不以为宁吉于。每次给我做那浪多面，用多참진在外白了就，人年人多那边对边对，用做边就让我上面边，顺住就是从这个对了，这边给上用完你都做。但当定子出现让人来，这位路所浪去用当的，高娃家长准备给我呢，准备关掉土地用完子，多能广播接人生活，世界一位将我看这些，有所要钱没人看这边。这上天的牛多瞧我是，能多去年上面点着，出松土气多当点子多，连着路面点对大茶叶，点别没人给me牛着手，嘛那边没红，嘛那边没红，嘛那边。O mane be me hu, o 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 mane be me hu. O mane be me hu, 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 o mane be me. O mane be me hu, 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 o mane be hu, o mane be me 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 hu. O mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me hu. O mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me hu. O mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me hu. O mane be me hu, 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 o mane. O mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me. O mane be me hu, 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 o mane be me. O mane be me hu, 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 o mane be me. O mane be me hu, 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 o mane be me hu. O mane be me hu, 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 o mane be me hu. O mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me hu. O mane be me hu, 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 o mane. O mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me. O mane be me hu, 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 o mane be me hu. O mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me hu. O mane be me hu, 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 o mane be me. O mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane be me hu. O mane be me hu, o mane be me hu, o mane. O mane be me hu, Omane beme 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 hu, omane. Omane beme hu, 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 omane. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme, omane beme, omane. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, Zamli yambe pende bedo ye, dinzi kedan ruve ge wo nam, chu chu nam chu chawa pewa zu, misi linge chabu yunu be, pa mi du ke na, nyam ta chu su ga ne, jibo gu xin ne de ga jia su u yu zu, Keba kanchu chun den gen ro nam na cho la lu bong se me tu nye gu zhong be cha ta chi me gun nyu do che be tu chi tu fong ge nye mo dun ge nye be lang chu ge ran xe nye bong ge be mi se ge bu to nam lang do me yong do cham zi za we be la ju Ring ne ning do na be de be de yong zo ben zhuang rang Lun zhu chu se song zhe ga de la zhe be ge san Den dan din zi chep se rang zhe le che be lu so long chi yong dan de Ga wa jia zha zhu be ge bo nam Zhuan zi gun de tu chi gyong wang zi Donang gongpo jire se wang ye, se je ge we jang a kan ji xin, yu su ge qi me lam kan ze be, zhe sang ten de nyu du chao wa su, nang du chun yin sang me ten zhe dang, chu song tu ji tu dang ten ji du, len zhe lo me ten tu da cha ye, ten be me lang ye me, Nyu zhu shu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, 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 omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane. Omane beme hu, 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 omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane beme hu, omane beme hu, omane beme hu. Omane salo.
Bertha. 야, 다들이 아니 상아 도지 택바스야. 아니 저거디 되야래. 다데 당어도 더버 국교도 뭐가체 그 두수 걸어로 전에다 년 유차진 안도 통한 게
Let us say the praise of Buddha. This is a salutation of the verses of salutation from Maitreya's Mula Madhyamaka Karika. So the text that has been distributed to the public, of course there's no explanation of it. So after having received the initiation, if you could actually do this, go over this sadhana on a daily basis, it would be good. But for the students, since you also have your studies to do, so it's not necessary. Even if you cannot do it, it's okay. So you can say the praise of Avolokiteshvara. He says you represent the thousand Chakravartins with your 1,000 arms and so forth, and then start. And then the ultimate generosity of Avalokiteshvara is within you, your own heart, your own mind. And then you recite the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra. So those who are enthusiastic about doing this sadhana, then you may do it on a daily basis, and then recite the Mani mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum mantra. So today we are going to go through the Tantra sacred mantra Vajrayana, as we already taught in the last days. The Buddhism that we have in Tibetan tradition is the pure Nalanda tradition, and with regard to that tradition, masters like Nagarjuna and his disciples and so forth all practiced Vajrayana, secret mantra Vajrayana, and not only did they practice, but they also wrote texts from their own experience. For example, Master Nagarjuna wrote, he mainly focuses on, explains Guya Samaja Tantra. So he wrote the generation stage practice of Guya Samaja called Dorje, and the Binda Krita Siddhi, and then Dorse, and then also the 5 stages of the Guya Samaja Tantra. And then Aryadeva also wrote his main text as Jedu. It's called Charya Milapaka. And then Nagabodhi wrote the mandala rites in 20 verses, and then Letha Namje, and then Aryadeva also wrote the text called Semkitibjong, or purifying the defilements of the mind. And then so it seems the Madankiva, who was a direct disciple of Master Nagarjuna, his text had not been translated into Tibetan. And then we have Master Chandrakirti. He wrote the Pradipodhyatana, the bright lamp, and which is the commentary to the root Guya Samaja root Tantra. So Master Aryadeva wrote the verification of mental defilements, and then Master Atisha also wrote text on Tantra, and the most clear exposition he wrote is the lamp for the path to enlightenment. And in order to dispel all kinds of misunderstandings and wrong understandings and ignorance about Tantra, he mentioned it in the lamp. And so this shows that there is a Buddhist Tantra. So one of the topmost masters of the Nalanda tradition was Master Nagarjuna, and as I read in the texts that I read after the teachings, we have the teachings of the Dzogchen teachings of the Drupakagye, the 8 practices, and the Dzogchen teachings are given on the basis of the 9 yanas. First is the Gunjung Gembe Thekpa, which is the teachings pertaining to the Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and then Bodhisattva yana. And so these teachings are based on the 4 Noble Truths and so forth. And then when you go into Tantra, within this 9 yana, there is the Kriya Upa Yoga, which are called the Vedic vehicles, emphasizing the practice of austerity, and there's the practice of emphasizing external activities such as cleanliness and so forth. And then there's the last 3 yanas are called Wongyur Tapki Thekpa, which refer to the generation stage of Mahayoga, and then Mahayoga, Anuyoga, and Adiyoga, which is the great perfection. Within the Adiyoga, there is the teachings of the categories of mind, the vast expanse, and then within the last category, there are others as well, subdivisions. And then in around the 9th century, Langdharma, since the time of the Langdharma, the Tibetan became a fragmented state, and there was no central ruler. And then some of the descendants of the Tibetan emperors went to the central Tibet, and then others moved towards the western parts of Tibet, towards the Ngari region. And then small principalities were ruled by their own rulers, and such was the situation. And so there was a great political decline, and then the monastic rules were not very clearly apparent, and then the tantric practitioners mainly were prevalent to take to preserve the Dharma. And of course, when you are really qualified, have the qualified experiences of Tantra, very high experiences with Tantra, then of course you can use sex and other alcohol and so forth. And therefore, since people did not have the qualified experiences, then they misused Tantra. And then in India, it is said that because the monks practice Tantra openly, and therefore the monks became very rich, and they lived a very luxurious life, and that in turn caused people, the general public, to lose faith in the Dharma, and as well as misusing Tantra. By that, in India, the people lost their faith, and then the kings and the rulers who used to support the Buddhist congregations and temples, monasteries and so forth also declined, and they turned their changed their sides to support the non-Buddhist traditions, and in this way Buddha Dharma declined in India. And so similarly in Tibet, because of misusing Tantra, and then the Dharma also had declined in Tibet. And in the past, in Nalanda, the monastic discipline was very strict. For example, in the case of the elder Dharmapala, who was a Chittamatra philosopher. It seems he has written texts on Chittamatra philosophy, and Wensek, who wrote a commentary on Sandhi-Nimochana Sutra, mentions, he quotes lots of quotes a lot from the Dharmapala's text. So I don't know whether these texts of Dharmapala have are there are translations in Tibetan or not. So he was a top scholar of Nalanda. So he also commented on, wrote a commentary of the 400 verses, interpreting it into the Chittamatra view. And then at some point he practiced Tantra. And when he reached quite a high stage of realization, of completion stage of Tantra, then he was able to have the Dakinis, wisdom Dakinis, were able to gather to him. And when he was sitting in staying in his monk's residence, and then the discipline master of Nalanda at that time was going around to check the monks in their rooms. And when he reached the room of Dharmapala, he actually heard voices of women. And then he peeked into the room, and he saw the wisdom Dakinis. And so, as this happened, the discipline master actually dispelled him from Nalanda. And then he became a practitioner of Tantra, called, and then he was known as Birwapa. So this shows how monastic discipline was actually very, these practices of Dharma were done very purely in the Nalanda tradition. And then Naropa was a great scholar of Nalanda, and he was the guardian of the northern gate. So when there were people who challenged Buddhists came into Nalanda from that gate, he was the one who actually faced the challenges without letting these challengers actually enter the monastery compound itself, and they would have discussions and resolve the issues at the gate. And so he was a great master of Nalanda University, monastic university, and then as he also reached a high level of Tantra, with regards to the parts and the grounds of Tantra, then he received a vision or prophecy. So he was prophesied by some Dakinis, and then he moved on to other places and practiced Tantra, as this priest says. So most of the 84 Mahasiddhas of India, Buddhist masters, were from Nalanda University. But when they were inside the monastery, then they lived as pure monastics. And once they took over the practice of Tantra explicitly, then they practiced what is known as the crazy wisdom behavior. And so Tantra was quite openly practiced and spread in Tibet. We have been too lenient, perhaps, and therefore Master Adisha, in his Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, mentions that for monastics who keep the Vinaya vows and precepts, we cannot receive the wisdom knowledge and secret initiations. So as I said yesterday, the other days, the fact that there are lots of arguments for the Mahayana to be the teaching of the Buddha, and were all done through reason and logic. And so Master Tsongkhapa was an amazing scholar and practitioner of the Dharmas, and he wrote in the Ngagrim Chemo. So the intelligent ones who aspire to practice the Dharma should so he says that those with intelligence, those who are wise and intelligent and also are enthusiastic about the practice of Dharma, should train the eye in the eyes of should train their intelligence and within the eyes of logic and reasoning, to the point that they are not actually led astray by challengers who may come to say that the such and such are not teachings of the Buddha, or the Tantra is not the teaching of the Buddha, and so forth. And therefore, one should be able to use reason and logic to argue for Mahayana and the Tantra to be the teaching of the Buddha. And he says, by using this logic, then try to seek a firm conviction in the teaching of the Buddha. So in Tibet, Buddhism actually spread the length and breadth of the country, but today we are in a different situation. We are in India, in exile. In India, there are those who do not accept Buddhism, and then there, with regard to philosophical assertions, there are those who assert a permanent, single and autonomous self, an Atman. And then there are those of the theistic religions who also assert an Atman, or a soul of theory of soul. And so within such a milieu of philosophical ideas, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition that we have also must be kept up through logic and reason. So since the 9th century, since the time of the King Lang Dharma, when Tibet became fragmented states, then there was decline in the study of the Dharma in general, the general structure of the Dharma. And then the Tantra was also misused. And then some of the Tibetans who were intelligent and bright came to India, such as Lojong Rinchen Sangpo, who actually successfully did his studies in India and returned to Tibet. And many translators like him came to India and did their studies here. And as I had written in the text, Opening the Eye of Wisdom, Lojong Rinchen Sangpo and others came during the second or the later dissemination of the Dharma, and within which we have the Sakya tradition, which came after the Master Birwapa, and then Naropa. From Naropa, we have the tradition of the Kagyu tradition, and then the Master Adisha. We have the Kadam tradition. And then, following the Adisha's tradition or the Kadam tradition, later on we have the Geluk or the Gedan tradition of Master Tsongkhapa. So, in the meantime, Shalu was the main place where there was extensive study of the Dharma, and also in the Jonang tradition. In other words, we have the 10 the traditions called the explanatory traditions or lineages, and the 8 practice lineages. So in other words, whether we follow the Nyingma tradition, or the Sarma tradition of Tantra, all of these the different schools of or traditions follow the philosophical view of Madhyamaka. So the Tibetan Buddhist tradition that we have in Tibet has the Tantric tradition. So Master Tsongkhapa says, while saying that the Tantra is higher than Sutrayana and so forth, which is quite well known in Tibet, like the sun and the moon. While accepting this to be true, this claim to be true, not trying to see what this Vajrayana is, and still holding on to, still claiming to be a scholar. And therefore, what more foolish could someone be? And therefore, I have studied all the different tantras, he says, and my destiny is well fulfilled. And he thanks Master Manjushri for helping him. And therefore, it is very important to study tantra. So while you may receive teaching, initiation from some realized master, but if you don't study the tantra, then and just remain ignorant about it, of course, master like Lotsawa, Marpa Lotsawa, and so forth, were great masters who had really the experience and the study or the imprints from the past. So in the Danger literature, there is a collection called Doha, and at the end of this Doha collection, this spontaneous experiential songs by Mahasiddhas, there is a text called Kapi. And so, where it says that certain traditions, certain teachings which are meant for those who can actually have the experience of understanding or realization and realization simultaneously, such teachings will turn and become poison for those who need gradual process of development, of spiritual development. And then those teachings which are meant for people who need gradual training, they can also become a poison for those who need spontaneous enlightenment and realization. And Gongdang Tenpe Drame also says that this medicine so I've written at the end of the 17 Nalanda Master's praise that while having the understanding of the general structure of Buddhism, that then if you actually go into Tantra practice, you will have a real conviction in the teachings of Tantra as well. And therefore, the texts written by the 17 Nalanda Masters are like a foundation for us to understand the import of Tantra Yana. So I usually say that I have there's one fault in me, which is once I open my mouth, then I can't stop speaking. And so once I start saying something, I tend to give more and more explanation on that. So this is a fault in me, and so with regard to the practice of Tantra, one must have the deeper understanding of bodhicitta and understanding of emptiness and that are taught even in the Sutrayana, without which it's very difficult for us to really have good understanding of the Tantra. And so what Tantra is to understand it is very important, and to do practice on the basis of that is very important. And so the teaching that we are going to deal with, it comes from the Nyingma tradition, the ancient or the old translation tradition. And so where I mentioned that there are the three in external tantras, Kriya, Upa, Yoga, and then there are the three inner tantras, which deal with the generation stage and the Anu Yoga, Maya Yoga, and then the general completion stage practice in the Anu Yoga. So Anu Yoga, Maya Yoga teaches the very extensive visualizations of deities and mandalas, and then the transmission lineage of Anu Yoga emphasizes on the practice of using the drops, channels, and chakras. So once you have a very strong, firm visualizations of the deity through the practice of generation stage in Mahayoga, then you can actually go into the practice of visualizing the chakras, the drops, the vital drops, and so forth. And then Adiyoga comes at the end to have the deeper realizations. So this particular initiation that we are going to go through comes within the category of Dubde practice section, and within that there are the 8 Dubakage. And amongst the 8, it belongs to the lotus speech lineage. The host of deities belonging to the speech deities. And then within the Nyingma tradition, there are these threefold teachings, lineages, which are the Kama, Dharma, and Thagnam. Or in other words, the Kama refers to the teaching of the Buddhas, the words of the Buddha, and that are considered to be the distant lineage, and then the and then we have the Dharma teachings, the revealed treasure, the hidden treasure teachings, and then the visionaries, the profound visionary teachings, visions. So within the visions, there are visions that appear to the senses, sensory perceptions, and also those that appear to one's mind. So with regard to this particular initiation, or the cycle of teachings that we are going to go through, it belongs to the category of those visions that appear to the sense perceptions, where the 5th Dalai Lama had a direct vision of the deity, and then so with regard to to certain teachings within the Gelug tradition, some of these teachings have come from the pure or profound visionary teaching lineage, such as Lama Umapa receiving teachings from Manjushri and passing it on to Tsongkhapa and so forth. And then the Lama Chöpa, the Guru Puja also seems to have come through visions. So, of course, for these to happen also, we should have the pure lineage of the traditions. And therefore, we have all kinds of visionary teachings that are extant in the Sakya, Kagyu, Gelug, and Nyingma, and so forth. Whereas in the case of the Kadam tradition, because the tantra was kept very secret, it seems there are very few that are related as visionary teachings. Now, with regard to this particular teaching that we are going to go through, the initiation, it is something that happens to the 5th Dalai Lama, and so during that time, there was this Pabongkaba Kundun Belchon Hindrup, who was a practitioner of the Hayagriva, the extremely secret Hayagriva, and he was someone who was a Rime practitioner, a non-sectarian. So he has written books that I have also seen that deal with the philosophical views of the non-sectarian traditions. So he received teachings on the stages of the path from his master, Yongzin Gonchok Chempel. And then he received so the third Dalai Lama had said that I have a very special karmic connection with Drepung for 5 lifetimes. So, from his time to the 7th Dalai Lama's time, he actually prophesied that he would have a special relationship with Drepung monastery. And so the 5th Dalai Lama received teachings from the Lamrim teachings and so forth from the Yongzin Gonchok Chempel, and then Nyingma teachings from Kundan Penchong Lindrup. And then he also had visions of deities and so forth. And then he wrote texts on the Sakya tradition of Lamde, a text called Lamde. And so he actually studied all the different traditions of Tibet. So he wrote a special text for the Sakya Lamde teaching tradition, and he had visions. So at the prophecy of the Nechung oracle, he did a retreat by inviting the Avalokiteshvara statue in Potala, and then also he invited the statue of Avalokiteshvara from the western part of Tibet. So when he did at one time the retreat on Avalokiteshvara, he invited Vadi Sangpo from the Kirong, and then the one from Potala, and then did the to Lhasa, and then did retreat. And so from the heart of Vadi Sangpo, the Songtsen Gampo appeared to him, and then he received this the initiation of the 9 deity Avalokiteshvara that we are going to do the initiation of. So, as prophesied by our master, Sambhava, over and over again, the emanation of King Chisung Detsen, one of the emanations of the King Chisung Detsen was the 5th Dalai Lama. So the 5th Dalai Lama was said to be the emanation of the enlightened activities of King Chisung Detsen, who was also the emanation of Manjushri. And at one time when he was doing this retreat in Potala, he had this vision of Guru Padmasambhava in this Sahur aspect, and from his heart appeared lots of the wrathful Guru, and to dispel all the obstacles. And then someone who looked like the consort of the king Chizongdesen appeared, and Gongzhou appeared and opened the door or the curtain, and then Songtsen Gampo appeared at the door and led him into the mandala of Chandrisik Avolokiteshvara. So regarding this, then after receiving these initiations and so forth, visionary teachings, then he passed it on to two of his disciples, the Dalai Lama and Rangzin Pema Tinle. And then I received this complete teaching of the visionary teachings of the fifth Dalai Lama from Dr. Rinpoche when I was a child. And then I got the text, which actually came from somewhere from Nepal. Then I had done the retreats, and I had done retreats of some of these teachings or initiations. So this is about the lineage of this teaching. And then we always say that Tibet is the special land to be tamed by Avalokiteshvara, China being the land to be tamed by Manjushri, and then there, of course, there is the very special pilgrim place or site in China called Wutaishan. And if you go there on pilgrimage, it is said that the different manifestations of Manjushri will appear, such as coming in the form of Manjushri, appearing in the form of birds and so animals, the animals and so forth. And therefore, it is even said that if you go on pilgrimage to Wutaishan, you should not hit the animals like dogs and so forth that you see with stones. So Tibet, being the land of Avalokiteshvara, since the time of the Tibetan emperors, the Dharma kings, Songtsen Gampo, for example, built many temples to overcome negative forces in the borderlands and the far-flung areas of Tibet. And therefore, in these temples, there are the statues of Avalokiteshvara, both the peaceful and wrathful aspects. And therefore, Tibetans are the ones who have special karmic connection with Avalokiteshvara. So, by those who do practice based on Avalokiteshvara, seems to have a gentle heart. And one of the Tibetan masters, deity or somebody, has said that reciting a Tara mantra or the long life mantras and so forth, you are actually looking for longevity, long lifespan, and also wealth and so forth. But if you do retreat, for example, where you recite Om Mani Padme Hum, you are not thinking of lifespan or wealth and so forth, or power, and therefore you are thinking, what you're thinking of is the suffering nature, suffering of sentient beings, and therefore the practice of compassion. And so this practice is particularly done to achieve higher rebirth and the goal of liberation. And so in Tibet, of course, the nomads had to live their life, and therefore sometimes they had to kill their animals. And when an animal is slaughtered or killed, then the whole family would recite Om Mani Padme Hum mantra. The whole family would, in one voice recite the mantra, and then they kill the animal because they could not survive without having meat, taking meat, and while they had to kill, they also see the disadvantage or the shortcomings and faults of killing as well. So they. So when they were killing these animals, of course, they may not be reciting mantras for long life or the Aryatara mantra and so forth, but Om Mani Padme Hum is recited. So as Tibetans, we are used to this, our elders saying that not to kill even insects. So he's always asked these children whether they kill insects or not. They say no. And so they shook their heads quite strongly. And so we are used to not killing animals, insects and so forth. And one of the former Tibetan government officials who went to America as part of the 1,000 Tibetans who were rehabilitated in the United States. So this former official got a job to work in a kitchen of some university and to clean vegetables. So he told me that whenever he found some bugs crawling on leaves, then he would pick that up and put them in one container. And once he finishes his work, then he would take this container filled with these bugs and to a safe place where these bugs could be safely. And then initially when he did that, the other colleagues who were working in the kitchen with him questioned him, why do you do this? You could just get rid of these bugs, just like that. And then his response was that these also have life. And then eventually his colleagues also began to follow him, picking up the bugs and putting them in the containers. And so we have this kind of nature to considering others' life to be important and sacred. So if you actually feel the life of others as dear, animals and so forth as dear, then of course you would feel the human life as dear as well. So there are these days those poultry farms, and then we can see truckloads of hens and chicken. And sometimes we can also see on the roads that some people just suspend 4 or 5 hens hanging from at the back of their cycles, hanging where the hens are, the legs of the hens are tied together and they are put upside down. So when you are not compassionate towards animals, then it seems that your compassion even towards other people also diminish. But we really should not lose this nature, this tradition, or this custom of considering others' life important and sacred as Tibetans. So regarding the 5th Dalai Lama, he was very kind to the people in the central region of Tibet particularly, and since the first Dalai Lama founded the Tashilhembo monastery, the Dalai Lamas had actually spread the Dharma and helped sentient beings in the Tsang regions. And then the second Dalai Lama founded the Dabu Shedobling and Ngari Dabu Ngari monastery. And in this way, his sphere of influence also spread there. And then the third Dalai Lama had connections with the Mongols as well. And in this way, the Dalai Lamas had actually served the Dharma and sentient beings. And so they are very kind. We should be grateful to them. And then the 5th Dalai Lama took the dual responsibility of the Tibetan nation And since the fifth Dalai Lama, the visionary teachings, the secret visionary, sealed visionary teachings have become the mainstay practice of the teachings of the Dalai Lamas. So of course, I didn't have much interest when I received these initiations of the secret sealed visionary teachings of the fifth Dalai Lama, although I received the initiations and the blessings and so forth. But later on, in retrospect, I found that in most cases, when I was going to receive these initiations and the blessings and so forth, I had dreams related to those initiations and blessings and so forth. And then when I did retreats after coming into exile, I also seemed to have some kind of connection with these deities. So recently, the people in Dharamsala did the money recitation of the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra. 100 million times, and so at that recitation, the Vajrayana statue of Avolokiteshvara was kept in the main temple. And when we came to exile, this statue was brought by Dzongkha monastery monks from Kirong into through Nepal and to India, and they brought it to me. And then when the Dzongkha monastery monks, the monks of Dzongkha monastery moved to South India, to Hunsur, then I did some divination, and checking whether Vajrayana, the statue of Avalokiteshvara, would stay with me or go with the Dzongkha monks. The divination came out that it would stay with me. And so in the past, for centuries, Dzongkha monks were the caretakers of this statue, but today I'm the caretaker of Vajrayana. So some of the monks of Dzongkha told me that sometimes there's some change. There's going to be some change in the moods of Vajrayana, the statue. It seems to be true. So there are different moods that I can see on Vajrayana's face sometimes. So in order to receive this initiation of Avalokiteshvara, this is cleansing the negativities. So I would like to see this. So with regard to the term secret mantra Vajrayana, secret symbolizes or indicates that this practice has to be done secretly, not in public or disclosing to others. So in the Kanjur, we have the sutra teachings, of course, as I said before. So for those who have impure karma, of course, they can receive. They could receive teachings that are given publicly. And then there are teachings like the Vajrayana teachings, sutras, which were given to very select disciples with pure karma. And then the tantras were given to very specific disciples who have a very capacity to have pure visions of deities and so forth. For example, Vajrayana, for example, came to Lalita. The teachings came from through Lalita Vajra, and then He Vajra Tantra. The teachings related to the father and mother so this came to Virvapa, and then Jagasamvara came to us through Luipa, the Gandapada and Krishnapada, and so these seem to be very befitting that the description of teaching is meant for some very specific disciples or persons. So in the Tantra we have numerous teachings, different teachings. There are these varieties of teachings in the Tantra, and the deities, varieties of numerous deities, appear in accordance with the dispositions of the disciples, the practitioners themselves. Whereas if you look at the Vajraparamita teachings, of course, they more or less are the same, and there is no difference. And then with regard to the chakras and the channels in the body, according to the Goyasamaja Tantra, then there are different the spokes of the wheels of at the crown, throats, hearts, the navel, and the sacred place. Whereas these are different, there are different numbers enumerated in Kala Chakra. And then in the Jagasamvara also there are different numbers of the spokes of the chakras. And so because of these difference in the chakras and the channels and so forth, the experiences also differ from the practitioners to practitioners. Whereas in the Kala Chakra, the appearance of smoke light come first, whereas in Goyasamaja and so forth, the mirage-like appearance come first. So the 6-branch practice that are in Goyasamaja and Kala Chakra are also different. And so in the practitioners of He Vajra and Jagasamvara Tantras emphasize on the Tummo practice, whereas the Goyasamaja and Yamantaka practitioners emphasize on the using the wind energy. And therefore, secrets refers to practicing these, doing these practices secretly. And then mantra means shielding our mind. What it shields our mind from is the appearance of ourselves as ordinary beings, and also conceiving ourselves as ordinary. So what you do is first you dissolve everything into emptiness. You can't just imagine this body that you have with flesh, bones, and skin, blood, and so forth, as being a deity's body, and which is going to be a totally distorted view. So what you do is to meditate on emptiness. Try to search for yourself within the body and the mind, and then when you actually see that you are not the body, not the mind, and there's no independently existent self, but then that meditation on emptiness appears or arises, your mind, totally absorbed in emptiness, arises into a deity. And so this mind, which is absorbed in the meditation on emptiness, appears in the form of a deity with a body and the sources of consciousness and so forth. And then, on the basis of that deity visualization, you also affirm that there is no independent existence of the deity as well. And therefore, that these two meditations do away with the perception of ordinariness of yourself and also clinging to yourself as ordinary being. So first, you have a strong certainty about yourself as being empty or selfless. And then you arise, in the case of Avolokiteshvara, then from within that meditation on emptiness, that mind absorbed in emptiness arises in the form of Avolokiteshvara. So in the text itself that is distributed, it also says, Om, from the syllable tree, this indivisible emptiness and compassion, seeing its own nature, emanates rays of light. And so you meditate on the emptiness of yourself. And then the purpose of meditating on emptiness is also in order to become an omniscient being for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And therefore, this realization of emptiness arises or is reinforced by this compassion, and the compassion also is reinforced by the realization of emptiness. So that is the meditation on emptiness is the concentration on so these and then it says so this line actually gives the three different concentrations: the concentration of reality, then cause. So when you are able to do the Deity Yoga practice within this kind of experience of emptiness and compassion, emptiness arises, mind of emptiness, wisdom of emptiness arising in the form of a deity, then of course you are able to actually combat or apply the antidote to your negative emotions and the obscuration to knowledge as well. And so secret mantra has that meaning of protecting your mind from the ordinary perception and ordinary clinging. And then Vajra means the indivisibility or inseparability of the method and wisdom. And then Yana means a vehicle by which you journey. And so, through this kind of practice of Tantra, secret mantra Yana, then you actually progress along the path to reach Buddhahood quickly. And so, merely this term, secret mantra Vajrayana, and from this term you can understand the import of the Vajrayana teachings. So, of course, the reciting mantras is also there in the Hindu tradition, as well as the Muslims also recite the name of Allah. And so, whether the Dharma becomes a Dharma for you or not depends on your motivation. However much you may do your practice of the Dharma without really causing any decline to your clinging to the 8 worldly concerns, and it may not become real Dharma practice. So if you actually do your Dharma practice to attain higher rebirth and or nirvana and so forth, although you may talk about bodhicitta and or not the bodhicitta much, but if it doesn't really move you within, then it doesn't really help. And so whether a practice becomes a Mahayana practice or not depends on whether you have this the principle of bodhicitta. And then without the insight into the indivisibility, inseparability of the profundity and clarity, your practice will not become tantric practices. So without, for example, if you have to drive a car or some vehicle, you need petrol or diesel, whichever oil you are using. So if there's insufficient oil, then it will not, the car or the vehicle will not move. You cannot drive it. So in Tibet, some lamas say that Tibetan tea, which is made from some crumbs of Tibetan hard cheese mixed with butter, and whether the tea becomes good or not depends on the quality of the butter that you use. And so whether your tantric practice becomes profound or not depends on the sutra. So the profundity of sutra is thanks to the sutra. The tantra is thanks to sutra. So in order to do tantric practice, you need some permission to do so, and without doing that, without receiving the permission, if you do tantric practices, it's considered to be inappropriate. And so, in order to do this initiation, so there are the certain things that are to be done by the guru, then disciples, and then where the initiation is given, who gives the initiation, and so forth. So please repeat these lines of request. In order to liberate us from the ocean of liberation, please let us inside the mandala. Please let us into the mandala. So with this you have requested to let you into the mandala to receive, and then request to give the initiation. And so in order to do that, next what is being asked is whether you are qualified for this. So if you assert Atma or God as creator and so forth, and if you have no interest in Shishism and Tantra, you are not, you don't qualify for this. With compassion to liberate sentient beings, we are enthusiastic about the Mahayana, and therefore, please give us the permission. Please give us the permission. Please give us the permission. And next is the offering of dharma to drive away obstacles or evil beings. So imagine me as the guru who is transforming into Guru Padmasambhava and just driving away these evil forces who might otherwise hinder this practice of the initiation. So with the Sumbani mantra of Sumba, the evil forces are asked to leave this place and not to hinder the initiation process. So I've told you the story of this particular institution. Please make the mandala offering. This ground strewn with flowers and anointed with Noi la ne la ma yi dam kunjo sum la be to je wan je shene da la jing ge la do su ren na men de la kam ni ya dong ye ta ye shu je ba cha wa sam ye su che den ze jin shu gyo ji I pray the sentient beings without exception may be liberated by the sounds of the great Dharma drum. Please stay to teach the path to enlightenment for inconceivable millions of eons. This ground and with perfume strewn with flowers adorned by Mount Merit, walk on the sun and moon. I imagine this is Buddha filled and offer it. May all living beings enjoy it. So put on the blindfolds. This symbolizes that you are not able to see the secrets. To symbolize the sacredness of Tantra, that it must be practiced in secrecy, and this you have to put on the blindfold, the red ribbon that you have been given. So when you enter into the mandala later, and you are able to see the mandala deities, then you would have to make an offering of flower garland of flower, and to symbolize that you are given a garland of flower. So the flower that you have been given symbolizes that. So please repeat this. The compassion of all the Buddhas into the mandala of Avolokiteshvara. Please let us, the fortunate ones, and make us matured and liberated. Make us matured and please lead us, fortunate ones, into it and make us matured and liberated. As I explained the other day about the practice of taking refuge and the bodhicitta, which differentiates us from the lower part, the wrong parts and the lower parts respectively. And so first we'll go the taking refuge. So the purpose of the is, as it says in the text, I and all wandering beings from now until enlightenment seek refuge in our gurus in order to liberate us from suffering. And then within the objects of refuge, there are the external, internal, and secret objects of refuge. And so, with regard to the external objects of refuge, there are the three roots. Lama as the roots of so the three roots are the two roots of the Lama, meditation deity and protectors. So the mandala structure that is visualized actually is the appearance in the form, in certain physical form, of the 37 factors of enlightenment. And so you are taking refuge in the three roots. The Lama as the root of blessings, the meditation deity as the root of realizations and accomplishments, and then the protected deities as the root of activities. So Buddha said, you are your own master. What he actually was telling us is this, that omniscient state of Buddhahood is something that we have to achieve by using the mind that we have now, this mind stream, or the consciousness, not the sense consciousnesses, but then the mental consciousness within which there are the gross, subtle, and the subtlest. And so the gross ones are not, doesn't go into the omniscient state of the Buddha, and therefore the subtlest mind become the omniscient mind of Buddha. And so in the Dzogchen tradition, it is also called Samandabhadra, the awareness, pristine awareness of Samandabhadra. And so within the terminology of Dzogchen, there are 8 different ignorances that are enumerated, such as the spontaneously risen ignorance and so forth. And so, in order that we may all achieve perfect Buddhahood for the sake of others, we generate the intention or the bodhicitta to accomplish Avolokiteshvara, Lord of the world. And so what you do is you meditate on emptiness and then rise. When you become a Buddha, your mind is absorbed in emptiness and also see everything as. So please imagine all the objects of refuge. I and all wandering beings from until enlightenment seek refuge in our gurus, the three roots, in order to until we see the true face of I and all wandering beings take refuge in the three roots and the deities until we see the face of our own pristine awareness. Next, we'll do the bodhicitta's generation of bodhicitta. So this pristine awareness, being introduced into a being or becoming aware of it directly, on the basis of which you complete the two accumulations of merit and wisdom and be able to serve all sentient beings across the expanse of space. And so by realizing this pristine awareness fully, And you are thinking of helping all other sentient beings. So we have done the bodhicitta explanation of bodhicitta yesterday. Please repeat these lines. Dagalana mebe nenjo cho. Nyamlan shendun chebar simket. This Buddha, the complete Buddhahood that is within myself, being able to see its barely and to help all sentient beings in order to liberate all sentient beings. I will generate a bodhicitta. So in order to take the vows of bodhisattvas and also tantra, we need also to accumulate merit and purify negativities, and therefore please repeat this practice of 7 limbs: Lama, Yidam and Kadu, Dakinis and Tathagatas, who sit on the sun, moon and lotus seats. I prostrate to you with body, speech and mind. I make offering of the external, internal and secret offerings, and I disclose or confess all the negativities and downfalls. I rejoice in the secret practice of the Tantra. Please turn the wheel of the Dharma for maturation and liberation. And I request you to not pass away and dedicate all this essence for the sentient beings. May I realize the perfect meaning of Vajra. Repeat this again. Sangha chukla jayira, mindru sangha chogokur. Nyanga meda sowa tep. Mindru simjen tendongo. Yanda doje tendo sho. Next is Bodhisattva vow. So not only leaving at the wish to attain Buddhahood or an omniscient state of Buddhahood by generating bodhicitta, but thinking that you will also engage in the practices of the bodhisattvas, such as the 6 perfections and the 4 ways of attracting practitioners and disciples, and that you will sincerely do the practices for the benefit. And so when you actually determine yourself to do the practices of bodhisattvas, then and you promise to keep the vows, then you are taking the vows. So as a commitment to that, what you pledge is you're not despising others and praising yourself. So there are, in other words, these 18 root downfalls that you find in the 6 sessions of Guru Yoga. The primary practice here is to stay away from extreme selfishness. So you have to reduce the selfish attitude and increase cherishing others, other sentient beings, infinite as the expanse of the space. And so, pledging that you will do the bodhisattva practices is the taking of the bodhisattva vows. And so, you should, having taken these vows of bodhisattvas, you should keep from the 18 root downfalls and also the 46 secondary infractions. So what you are saying is that you will actually take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until you become enlightened. So, by seeking the refuge in the three jewels, you also confess your misdeeds and rejoice in the virtues of all beings. And then you think of generating bodhicitta. And then also you say to the Buddha, Dharma, and the highest assembly, I seek refuge until I reach enlightenment. To fulfill the interests of oneself and others, I shall generate the mind of awakening, bodhicitta. Having generated the mind for highest awakening, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. I shall engage in the delightful, supreme, best practices of enlightenment. May I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So these are the lines that you are going to repeat. Please kneel on your right knee. If you have bad knees or bad legs, then you have exception here. Please repeat these lines. I seek refuge in the three jewels. I confess all misdeeds individually. I rejoice in the virtuous deeds of all beings. I take to mind the Buddha's enlightenment. To the Buddha, Dharma, and the highest assembly, I seek refuge until I reach enlightenment. To fulfill the interests of oneself and others, I shall generate the mind for awakening. Having generated the mind for highest awakening, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. I shall engage in the delightful, supreme practices of enlightenment. May I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of sentient beings. Please repeat it for the second time, beginning with the taking refuge in the three jewels. All sentient beings are same as you in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. And then we all have the same, the cause for, the seed for enlightenment. And by overcoming all the defilements that are adventitious, temporary, and not in the intrinsic nature of the mind, and therefore to lead all sentient beings to that highest enlightenment, where they see the nature of their minds fully. And I will take bodhisattva vows. I seek refuge in the three jewels. I confess all misdeeds individually. I rejoice in the virtuous deeds of all beings. I take to mind Buddha's enlightenment. To the Buddha, Dharma, and the highest assembly, I seek refuge until I reach enlightenment. To fulfill the interests of oneself and others, I shall generate the mind for awakening. Having generated the mind for highest awakening, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. I shall engage in the delighting supreme practices of enlightenment. May I attain Buddhahood to benefit sentient beings. So, at the end of the third repetition now, when you say, may I attain Buddhahood to benefit all sentient beings, feel that you have received the bodhisattva vows, the complete set of bodhisattva vows. So I too take bodhisattva vows 3, 4, 5 times every day, and I also did the same when I did the preliminary preparatory ritual earlier. And so, just as the bodhisattva vows are within me, likewise you should think that at the end of this final line, feel convinced that you have received the bodhisattva vows. But if you feel that you are not so apt now to take the bodhisattva vows and that you will not be able to engage in the bodhisattva practices, then you should not think that you have received bodhisattva vows. At this point, I seek refuge in the rituals. I confess all misdeeds individually. I rejoice in the virtues of all beings. I take to mind Buddha's enlightenment to the Buddha Dharma and highest assembly. I seek refuge until I reach enlightenment. To fulfill the interests of oneself and others, I shall generate the mind of awakening. Having generated the mind for highest awakening, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. I shall engage in the delightful supreme practices of enlightenment. May I attain Buddhahood to benefit all sentient beings. Today my life has borne fruit. Please repeat this. I have attained an excellent human existence. Today I am born into the Buddha's family, and now I have become a Buddha's child. Now, come what may, I shall act in accord with this lineage, never causing this impeccable, noble lineage to be tarnished. Please sit down. So from now on, so you have to be a good person and never think of harming others. So the motto of TCV school is others before self, and so this is the essence of the Mahayana practice. So sometimes when people hear, others before self, they think of sacrificing their own well-being. And so in the ritual that we just went through, it's even said to fulfill the interests of oneself and others. And so you're not forsaking your own interest at all. But the best way to serve one's own interest is by holding others to be dear, by caring about others. And so don't misunderstand altruism, meaning you think nothing of yourself. And next is the tantric vows. So those who have taken bodhisattva vows can take tantric vows. Those who have not taken bodhisattva vows, you cannot take the tantric vows as well. So do you get me? Yes. There's somebody who shakes his hand or heads a lot or nods a lot, saying yes. So from whom you take this the tantric vows are the host of mandala deities. So taking bodhisattva vows and also engaging in the bodhisattva practices. Now on top of that, you have the tantric vows. So with regard to tantric vows, there are, generally speaking, 14 root downfalls that you have to keep, and then there are 19 precepts related to the 5 Buddhas. And then in the Nyingma tradition there are 28 more precepts that you have to keep. So this gaining mastery, the jhana where you gain mastery, means that within this steady yoga practice you actually do away with you overcome the negative emotions. So these negative emotions have the cognitive nature, and that very basic cognitive nature actually goes into the omniscient mind, whereas the defiled aspect is overcome. So in other words, here the 5 poisons are not abandoned, but they are transformed into the path. Then you also try to accomplish the 5 Buddha families who belong to the various lineages, like the jewel lineage and so forth. And then there are the other things mentioned, which are like the practices that you engage in. And so, in other words, you're saying that you will keep all these precepts of Tantra, and with that determination, if you're taking Tantric vows, repeat these lines. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions. Please think of me, kindly pay attention to me. From now on until enlightenment, we take refuge in the 3 supreme jewels. And we'll keep the bodhicitta. So the Tathagata lineage, you are keeping the precepts of the Tathagata lineage, the Vajra lineage, and then the jewel lineage, and lotus lineage, and then the activity lineage, and then the 28 unique precepts within this context of this tradition are repeated. So we'll keep all these precepts and commitments, and to liberate all sentient beings from the ocean of samsara, attain the highest attainment of Vajradhara. So you're keeping the different commitments related to the 5 Buddha families, such as the Tathagata lineage and so forth. You'll keep all the vows and precepts of the secret Mantrayana, and when you say at the 3rd repetition, may I attain the highest unsurpassable Vajradhara. Those who are taking the Tantric vows here, please feel convinced that you receive the complete set of Tantric vows at the end of this 3rd repetition. So those who have taken Bodhisattva vows but feel not so sure about whether you will be able to keep the Tantric vows or not, and then you may say, I don't know. And please repeat it for the 3rd time. The Bodhisattva and Bodhisattvas, the 10 directions, 4 times. I take refuge in the 3 jewels. I'll keep the bodhicitta and supreme bodhicitta, and I'll keep all the essence of Vajrayana, the precepts related to the 5 Buddha families. And then the unique 28 unique precepts. I'll keep all the vows. May I attain the unsurpassable Vajradhara. So with this we are done with the Tantric vows. And then next is the all-encompassing or universal yoga mind. So this is very important. I consider it's very important, as we have heard the last days. Just as a blind person accidentally finds a gold in the garbage, I, who am suffering in the samsara, how nice I have this bodhicitta. So it is the butter churned out of the ocean of the milk of the Dharma, the bodhicitta. So with this, what you intend is to help all sentient beings across the expanse of space, just solely to dedicate yourself to help others. When you are able to understand it and take interest in actually applying this, then you will have real happiness. That will be the onset of happiness for you in life. Whether people believe in Buddhism or not, whether they follow Buddhism or not, if people are dedicated for the take care of others, then there will be peace of mind. So if you actually let them yourself, if people let themselves be carried away by all kinds of negative emotions, there's not going to be peace in the world. So millions and millions of fish and hens are killed, and then we also kill human beings. There's killing amongst this, and so with this kind of dedication to help others, of course these will reduce. So even if with wealth and money and so forth, these troubles will not be overcome, cannot be overcome. So the religious traditions of the world are not able to overcome the problems and the troubles in the world. So something that can be accepted by all commonly is altruism, thinking of caring about others, whether you are a believer of religion or non-believer. So in Buddhism, what we are talking about is thinking that we are saying that we would try to attain the highest goal of enlightenment, Buddhahood, by using our wisdom and coupled with the altruistic attitude. So this is possible because the defilements are not permanent and they are adventitious, and that there is a powerful antidote to these defilements and the negative emotions, as well as the residual stains. And the nature of mind is such that if you cultivate some qualities, it can increase infinitely. You can cultivate it infinitely. And therefore, omniscient state of Buddhahood is something that is possible, and it is possible for you to attain that. And then, when you see that possibility for yourself, then you will also see the possibility of this for others as well. Therefore, you think of bodhicitta to benefit, to become enlightened or reach Buddhahood for the benefit. All sentient beings have this intention to reach Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings, and meditate on this bodhicitta for a minute.